We are here today with Mercy Desimone, who has told me all sorts of interesting things about causing trouble and also possibly the royal cat duo. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on at the moment.
So I'm a new-ish writer. I've been writing for about 2 years.
Okay.
I started actually as a contemporary reverse harem writer.
Okay.
So I am the nerdy girl that always loved sci-fi and fantasy books.
Yeah.
And I also love contemporary romance. I love urban fantasy. I love PNR. And I love books with a little bit of steam. So basically, I have this tendency to create mashups in my
Uh-huh.
world of just all the things that I like to read
Oh,
together.
it's fun.
So the latest book that came out, I call it a new age reverse harem sci-fi fantasy romance mashup. That's Spectral
Wait,
Vibrations.
wait, what? New age, first harem,
Reverse
five.
harem
Wow.
sci-fi fantasy romance. So that's
Wow.
the book that probably we want to talk about. What I'm working on now is for spring, I have a new contemporary reverse harem romance coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And in August, we have a shared world where 15, 16 authors have gotten together to do books about time travel. And it's called the Women in Time series. So I
Ooh, time.
just did a cover reveal on that last week. And that book is called Cadence in Time. And it's all about my time travel will be forward. So it becomes more science fiction. And black cats are very integral to the plot and the society.
Ooh, ooh, very fun. Very fun. Okay, we'll start with the book that you just recently released because I'm very curious about that. And we'll get into time travel later because
Okay.
I mean,
Come on.
okay, so
So
tell us a little bit more because I've seen, science fiction fantasy mashups and sci-fi romance mashups and even new age fantasy reverse harem mashups, but all of those? Wow.
yeah, the weird thing is when I was writing it, it
Hmm.
made perfect sense in my head. What I didn't anticipate is there's no way to market this. It's
Oh
almost
no.
not, it's almost too fantasy and world building sci-fi for the true reverse harem fans who are used to
Uh-huh.
steamy reads and want, the
The
steam to be
steamy
the integral
reads.
plot. And
Yeah,
I didn't anticipate that there weren't other nerdy girls like me who, with sci-fi fantasy, just said, yes, now I get to have some steam in there with it. And, there's a lot of people that read their sci-fi fantasy and aren't
right,
used to that creeping in. So I kind
right.
of wrote myself into a corner, but I'm convinced that there are other people like me out there.
There are other
Um,
people like you out there. It's just finding that niche is
right.
tricky.
Right. So when I say it's new age, it incorporates a lot of, I've always been kind of the spiritual kid.
Hmm.
I always loved reading about Edgar Cayce and mediums and auras and crystals and all of these wonderful things when I was growing up. And
Right.
new age was just always part of my life. So
Hmm.
it made sense to me to have that kind of creep into my sci-fi fantasy. It's actually what anchors it.
Okay.
And this book, the other thing I did was I pretty much wrote the book backwards. So the book is written
Oh
in
my goodness.
3 parts. So it
Okay.
starts on Earth. The story is basically about our FMC Tansy,
Uh-huh.
who lives on the planet Chrysalis.
Uh-huh.
But through circumstances, she falls to Earth. So the book
Oops.
opens up on Earth, where she comes to Earth. And then in the middle, we basically go back to Chrysalis and rewind a few, we'll say months, although their time is a
Sure.
little bit different than ours,
Sure.
to get to the events leading up to her fall. And then the third
Uh,
part of the book, we go back to Earth to see what happens once she gets there.
oh.
So this is the first of what is supposed to be a 3-book arc.
Hmm.
And, and the other thing is I have a tendency, this was the first book that I wrote in multiple POVs because I really loved to see the action and how everything was happening from the perspective of different people in the story.
Yeah, I get it.
So it's
very fun. Okay, so the fantasy bit come in.
Right. So the fantasy and the world building is basically creating an entire society. So the crux of the story is this planet Chrysalis was a planet of commerce and, in the universe, actually in the galaxy of Sidonia. So on Earth, it takes place in Sedona. So if you know anything about energy and Sedona and ley lines, they say Sedona is on the same ley line as Stonehenge. So I figured, well, then there's no reason why it shouldn't have a direct thread to space. So we have the galaxy of Sidonia, and Chrysalis is a planet in Sidonia. But they had a great society until a supernova exploded nearby, and it increased the radiation on the surface of the planet. And the bodies of the people who lived on Chrysalis eventually evolved to combat this radiation by starting to evolve to where their bodies then became encased in what was called silica, which is a very thin, flexible crystalline coating. But consequently, it then kept them at a social distance from being able to touch one another. And because you could no longer touch or have anything penetrating your body, they became a childless society. So then the power structure shifts because now the only way people can relate is through energy and frequency, which is reflected off your aura. So it's all about everybody has a specific aura. We're on the Roy G. Biv scale, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Tansy, our female, our FMC, is a violet empathic healer. And she's an elite scientist who is being tasked to help solve this problem of breaking down the bodies and these barriers to reproduction for the society. Right. So then it becomes a political game and a cat and mouse game.
Oh my goodness. Wow, all the drama.
So it's a little convoluted. I think it makes more sense when you read it. And each person bonds energetically through frequency. It really wraps up a lot of the old influences and a lot of the old things. I was talking to somebody else. I go back to old movies, even like Barbara Streisand and What's Up, Doc? I don't know if you've ever seen that one, where her boyfriend has this igneous rock collection and he's doing his thesis on igneous rocks, and even reading things about crystals and how rocks have frequency and energy, etc. So it just combines all of those different things together in one world.
Yeah. Ooh. And then, of course, she falls to Earth.
Right. Where then she falls to Sedona, and when you go off planet, there is a concept of anchoring. So once you're outside of that influence of Chrysalis, your body can anchor on other planets where now you can feel everything. You basically lose that protective veneer. And now how do you live and deal in a world where everything has become totally foreign to your experience? Because now you feel viscerally versus just energetically through frequency.
Oh, wow. Oh, that would be very strange, like discovering a new sense that you didn't have before.
Yes. So all the feels, the feels, hunger and, heat, because before you're even just feeling things like hot and cold through your silica was tempered to basically protect your body.
Right. Wow. Oh my goodness. I would be so overwhelmed. I'd be like tripping into doors and things.
So it's an interesting book. For me, I'm very much of a pantser. Normally when I write, I don't plot extensively. For this, I had pages and pages of notes and plotting and names and things, because for world building, you really need that for cohesion. Yeah. And then all of the characters, I called my main character's name is Tansy. I said she's a violet healer. all of the character names are derived from crystals and the color on the spectrum. So
Oh,
tansy is short for tanzanite, which is a purple stone.
right.
So her bond mate is Laz. He's an indigo, which is short for lapis lazuli, which is a blue stone. So, it was all of those little quirky things that I included in there in the story also, just because A, it amused me. And, I felt like I had to take it to that extra edge.
Yeah. Ooh, that sounds fun. Also, all the research that you get to do.
Yes, and then of course, then you have to have the animals. So Tansy actually has a pet chameleon named Karma, and the one of our characters on Earth, his name is Dixon. He's the one that finds her in the deserts of Sedona. He has a pet named Squeezle.
Squeezle?
Yes, but I won't tell you what Squeezle is. You'd have to read it to figure out what a Squeezle is. But yes. So we have Karma and Squeezle also in the story because everybody has to have animals and pets.
That's fantastic. I love it. That's, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, I should probably move on and ask about the time travel book before I break down completely and want to know all of the details.
So the time travel book, I won't say too much about because I haven't really released a blurb. I've put up the cover. I can tell you, like I said, that there's 16 books in this whole series, which starts in June. My particular book is really right in the middle. I'm like book 9. So my release date is August 7th. But it really has an influence with time, but also time in terms of cadence, which is why it's called Cadence in Time. So there are some animals in this again. Cats are very important to the story because most people don't realize that cats have been so reviled in our society as being bad luck and the familiars of witches, etc., because people don't realize that black cats are actually portals to other worlds.
Oh, that explains so much.
And being that time is circular, what happens here is also happening in the future, is also happening in the past. So that's why in the future, the black cats, because they consider themselves gods, have retreated to their own planet. So they're no longer acting as portals for people. So now we have privateers that have to go throughout the universe and try and gather black cats because people do need portals to other places.
Oh, I'm sure that goes over really well with the cats.
Well, they don't mind being portals as long as they are being revered in the process. And of course, everything has to be done on their time.
Exactly. It's the snatching and the grabbing and the, the manhandling and the ruffling of the fur.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are some other than creatures from space that will make appearances and make sense to the story. But that's pretty much what happens is we're going backwards and forwards. From present day to space. And I haven't decided, we might go a little bit backwards even further from today to the past and accelerate forward again. I think we're just going to jump around through time, actually. I haven't, this one might be more novella-sized just because I'm on a time crunch. What I have been trying to do, though, is find fun ways to link my books. So even though they're not in the same universe, you will find references to the same universe. And some things that happened on Chrysalis might be relevant within this story as well.
Well, I mean, if cats are portals, then yeah.
Well, absolutely. And chameleons, squeezels, cats, it's all pretty much the same.
Yep. Oh, what fun. Okay, so for your what's the title of your new age sci-fi fantasy romance?
Spectral Vibrations.
Spectral Vibrations. Okay. And you said it's a 3-book arc.
It is a 3-book arc. I have not started book 2 on that one yet. just because I kind of jumped back and forth from sci-fi fantasy to contemporary to sci-fi fantasy and back again. It gives my brain a little bit of a break. And like I said, I think this one just needed a little bit more time to build its audience also, because like I said, so many people just didn't quite know what to make of it. But I do hope to begin book 2 shortly after I drop Cadence in Time. It's definitely on the schedule for this year. Will I have it out this year? Can't say 100%, but I would certainly love to have book 2 at least mostly done. I'm kind of a slow writer when it comes to a lot of people. Some people write so fast, and I'm so envious of their process. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah. Well, of your process, from idea in the brain to, well, preferably money in the bank as opposed to out of the bank, do you have a least favorite part?
Promotion.
You're not alone.
No. And you know what? The reality is I do a tremendous amount of it. I really do. I'm on every platform. I mean, I've grown my Twitter, my Instagram. I have a closed Facebook group as well as a Facebook page. And, I've grown everything pretty steadily over the last year, but it takes daily maintenance. And for Instagram, I got this weird idea. I just had my 1-year anniversary of Car Talks on Instagram because every Tuesday morning I tape a 1-minute video on my way to work in the car and post it on Instagram. So last week was my 50-second week, 50-second video. And that's often how I let people know what I'm doing on IG.
Sure.
But it all takes time.
Oh, absolutely. And doing all of the platforms, they require different things and different ways to grow it. And some things are interesting here, but not there. And
right. And now newsletter. Now I've been ramping up my newsletter. So that's a twice a month venture. It's like, so then you have to, and then I'm holding down a full-time job when we're not in this mode. Right. And so, then it's trying to find time to write between the spaces. And for me, I need to really feel in that safe space to write. It takes a lot for me to turn my brain off sometimes and switch it into a creative mode.
Yeah. That is one problem with being a creative type, is even when it's not, the creative process, the brain just never stops.
No, it doesn't. And I think I work very well left brain as well as right brain. When I'm at work, different things become important. Right. But I really don't do well managing both of them at one time. There has to be a distinct break for me where I turn one off and, I turn off that analytical piece and I get into a creative flow, and vice versa. When I'm in that flow, the last thing I want to do is stop and break off and now have to think about putting together a newsletter and all of the different strategic pieces of what needs to go into that at any given time. So it is interesting. Some people just seem to be able to write and flow and go, and I'm really envious of that.
Yeah, well, only on odd Tuesdays of leap years, maybe.
That's pretty much what I say. Actually, there's something about that in my new contemporary romance, because I model some things off of life events. And that character is trying to be a writer and basically says, you know what, if I just write 2,000 words a day, I could have this book out next month. Maybe. Not really. Well, if the polar ice caps melt, and pigs fly, it's just that's the things that we tell ourselves, right? I can do this. I can make this happen. Yeah, you could, but you didn't. Okay, well, maybe next time.
Well, I mean, there's one thing that I can consistently make happen. That is the eating of chocolate. And otherwise...
Well, chocolate is the 6th major food group. So at least, you're following the food pyramid correctly.
Exactly. Everything else, it'll get done at some point.
Yes. So, a lot of the memes right now are all about, if you're social distancing and you're sitting at home, which I think this really should apply to writers at any time, is that you A, you should wear pants. Many of them do not. B, you should occasionally get out of the sweatpants to see what really is not fitting anymore. And D, the one that I saw the other day that made even more sense is if you're sitting around doing all this stuff, you should really do it in your bathing suit so that you can see what it is that you're doing to your body as you're sitting here snacking your way through your day. So yes, I am trying to actively get up, get dressed, put on some makeup, do my hair, because when I go back to work, my shudder at the thought of how hard it's going to be to get back into that transition.
Oh, yeah. That'll be fun. And who knows how long that'll take. We'll see.
Right.
Oh, for goodness sakes, yeah. So this contemporary piece, I imagine it's rather completely different from everything else that you've done.
Yes and no. I think that one of the things that you'll find in my books is that my characters, to a certain extent, always tend to be a bit older because I'm older. They tend to be, I'm not necessarily going to go out and write the kick-ass heroine who takes no prisoners and just wants to, I don't know, shoot, beat, kill everyone. I don't do dark. My books are never really dark. I like to have some sense of hope in my book. It doesn't mean that they can't be serious, but I like things to be on the lighter side. But I'm that way with what I read and what I watch, movie-wise, etc. I never like stories. I don't mind a good cry here and there, but at the end, I want to feel uplifted. Yeah. I don't watch slasher films. I'm not a horror film person. I definitely don't read horror books. I'm not big into bully has been so big lately. I'm not into mean stories. Bully. So in contemporary and in romance in general, although you see it a lot in PNR and urban fantasy bully books, so it's all about, people being bullied, and there's always this redemption piece of one person being bullied by others. I'm like, I don't have time for that. I'm a positive person. I'm all about let's keep it to the light. Let's keep it to the happy.
I haven't seen that, but maybe that's probably because I'm not actually paying attention.
Yeah, it's like anything else. You pay attention to the market. You kind of take a look at what's trending when you're writing. I think that's another little challenge I have is I never like to write to market. I want to write what I want to write.
No, exactly. If I'm writing it, I'm usually the one who's interested in it, and I don't care beans what the market says.
Right. I mean, fae books are really hot right now as far as fantasy. Everything is about fae. Fae is just one category of magical creatures that never appealed to me. Other than Karen Marie Moning's books, but even there, it just got a bit much for me. So, for me, I go back to old school, like Mercedes Lackey. I like the mages. Where did half of us start? Chronicles of Narnia, right? Talking animals. Where was Aslan in your life? I liked Ellie Modesset, if we're talking more traditional fantasy. Spellsong War, I love those books. Those are some of my favorites. And music is really important to me as well. You'll find that music creeps into all of my books in some way, shape, or form. And I always create a playlist for every book that I write. And I put Spotify playlists out for my readers.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I wish I had done Spotify or figured it out so I could do that with some of my books, although I tend to listen to the same thing over and over and over again when I write.
Yeah, but I do too. And it's never too late. I think, as far as back matter goes, especially if you're in digital books on Amazon or Nook or whatever, you can always update those files. I find that people really like that. Some people do mood boards with their books when it comes to, with their Facebook group and when they're in the writing process and they want their fans to be able to get excited and follow along. I suck at mood boards. I just can't do it. I have another writer who's a good friend who alpha reads for me occasionally. And thank you, Lord, for Alicia. She goes out and makes mood boards for me. But
for her.
Yeah, and it's great. But for me, I'm all about the music, and I have a specific soundtrack of things that I listen to when I write. I'm very affected lyrically and how that ties
Oh,
into the story. So,
sure.
so by making that available to my readers, I think they get a better idea of who the characters are and the headspace that I'm in as I'm writing.
Yeah, that's always a good thing to do. I love the extra bits with characters. Those things that aren't actually in the book, but are very
Yes.
entertaining.
Yes. Now, and Easter eggs, like I like to hide
Yeah,
little
yeah.
references and things. Do you do a lot of that, EG?
Um, More than people probably realize.
But that's the fun part because it's those few people that do realize that suddenly you get a message on Facebook or through Messenger or something where somebody said, "Hey, were you talking about or referencing?" And you're like, "Aha,
Yep.
yes." And then
Yep.
there's
Those are fun.
some, and then times when we think we're being oh so clever and just nobody catches it. You're like, "Oops."
That happens far more than I would like.
Yeah. What inspires
Yeah.
you when you write? What gets you revved? What puts you in your creative space?
Um, well, I mean, tea. I always have tea. If there's no tea, then my brain is just kind of footsing and dying. It's rather sad. But most of the time, it's just my brain is always constantly working on a problem or an idea, and it just percolates and eventually spills out onto the page. And if it makes sense, I'm thrilled.
Do you write more than one story at a time? Do you like to split your attention between manuscripts, or do you have to stick to
Um,
one train of thought?
I usually have a couple projects going at different times, but they're never in the same spot. Like I'm always, writing something and editing something else, or planning something out if I am planning that particular book, and then actually writing something else. So it's always more than one thing, but never the same process or point in the process, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the same for me. Cadence and Time, like I said, that one is coming in August. I've
Right.
started it. It hasn't gotten a ton of attention to it. I know the basic outline. I know where it's going. I know who the characters are. But I'm
Hmm.
working on the contemporary first. The contemporary, I'm already 68,000 words in.
Oh, very exciting.
Normally books tend to run between 70 and 80K. This one,
Yep.
I feel like I'm only 3/4 of the way in. So I think this one kind of turned into a beast. At some point, I'm going to have to shift gears, though, if it doesn't move faster, go to Cadence and come back.
Hmm. Yeah. For people trying to well, I was going to say get into your niche genre, but I don't. Your niche genre is very niche. I was going to say, are there traps to avoid? But, well, besides marketing,
Well, I think you do have to. I don't know. I think you have to know what it is that you want out of it. If you really and truly want to be a successful mainstream writer, then you have to follow the mainstream.
yeah.
At some point, if you decide that the story in your head is more important to you than the traditional success, then I
Hmm.
think you have to run with that. Doesn't mean that I'll never try to write a mainstream story, but it just doesn't seem to be the way my brain works.
That's okay.
So
It sounds fun.
I think that's it for me. Is for me, writing is meant to be fun. When it becomes more stressful,
Yeah.
is when I know that I'm off track and I know my muse has left the building.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah. And also, I think one of the biggest pitfalls of writing really and truly can come in when you find yourself making too many comparisons. You
Hmm.
have to realize this is about you, this is about your book, this is about your journey. And if you're going to sit there and compare yourself, again, if I'm going to sit here and compare myself to the people who pound out 8 to 10K a day in words, it's one writer just the other day put 19K down on the page in one day. I said, how on earth did you do 19K? There's only 24 hours in a day. I mean, that's got to be close to 2,000 words an hour.
That's
I'm
pretty
lucky.
fast.
Yeah, I think my biggest day ever was about 6,000 words, and that took me most of the day. I'm just not a fast writer. You know
Yeah.
what? Because also I have a tendency to edit myself as
Uh,
I write.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people just write and don't worry about anything else. I see those red marks on the page that
Drives me
pop up
crazy.
for typos and things like that, and it drives me crazy. That's
Me
where my
too.
OCD kicks in, and it's
Hmm.
like I have to go back and fix it immediately. So I'm constantly going back and rereading and editing as I write. That slows me down, but I think it helps on the back end. It speeds up the back end process of editing.
I think probably it does because you're not worrying about having to deal with every single piece, every single sentence, and all of the grammar structure and whatnot.
Yeah, by the time my beta readers get my books, they're pretty clean. There's
Hmm.
not a lot. I mean, I'm sure there are grammatical shifts and things in there, and they're going to catch the small detail, the weird words that slip through,
Hmm.
from autocorrect, or where autocorrect something that was not at all what you intended. Yeah, that's where the beta readers for me are really helpful from the editing side. But
Yeah.
I've done beta reading for some authors where I was just like, oh, I don't even know where to start. Like,
Oh,
what it's just a really rough manuscript. And I don't like people to see my writing that way. I guess I don't want to be seen as that imperfect.
it all depends on how much editing goes in while you're writing, I suppose.
Right, right. And for beta readers, everybody has different strengths too. So I think
Exactly.
that's another important piece as a writer is figuring out, A, are you using beta readers? If you are, what is your purpose
Hmm.
for them? And choosing them strategically, assuming
Yeah.
that, you have enough people offering to help or wanting to read that you have the ability to make some strategic
Right.
choices.
Right.
So somebody who's really good at the spag, the grammar, the spelling, the punctuation, somebody else that's really good at the continuity piece, somebody
Hmm.
else that's just good at grabbing, where you just went off into a totally random plot bunny that had really no bearing
But
on the story whatsoever other than it amused you.
yeah, that's what plot bunnies are for.
They multiply, don't they?
They do so very much, but they often are very entertaining.
They are. Even when I was writing Spectral Vibrations, do you ever find that suddenly I had a character that was really pretty quiet through
Hmm.
the first 3/4 of the book, and then suddenly he had a hell of a lot to say? And it was cool when he finally started speaking up and evolving and creating this platform for himself. The challenge was he created plot holes from earlier in the story that I then
Oh,
had to go back and say,
oh,
okay, well, if he's doing all this, then how did X happen?
mm,
Well, didn't happen that way. So then you have to go back to the beginning and close all of those little plot holes. I think it made the story better. I could have left him in the state he was in,
yeah.
but when a character really starts to speak to you, sometimes you really just have to flow with it. But it
Hmm.
does create challenges along the way.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, making sure that everything actually makes sense from the beginning to the end is a bit tricky sometimes.
Right. I mean, luckily with sci-fi and fantasy, sometimes you can just say, hey, it's a different world. That's just how it
Magic.
works there.
Magic. That's my favorite answer.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, it has been super fantastic talking with you. I'm very interested to read your very niche book because it sounds fun.
It is fun. I think it's fun. I think, again, for the people more who really enjoy world building, I think I've created some really intriguing concepts in there that
Hmm.
draw you in. The characters really start to take on life about halfway through the book because, as always, you have to build the world first
Right.
for people to really understand the interaction. And I did leave it on a bit of a cliffhanger. Not a serious cliffhanger, but there was a little bit of something at the back end that I was glad a lot of people said, oh my God, I did not see that coming. And I was like, yes, okay, good. That's great because then at least you know that your plotting was sound throughout
Yeah.
the book.
Oh, that's great. Ooh.
So,
Ooh.
I can't wait to get back into that story because there is a lot more to tell and it is going to continue to jump around. But
Yeah.
again, I don't like things that are always so linear. My brain is just not that linear.
That's what makes things entertaining.
That's what I say. It's all
Yeah,
improv.
exactly. If you can't have a little bit of writer craziness, well then, what's the point?
Right. Just wear pants when you're doing it.
Yeah. Pants are good. Is there anything else you'd like to add, writing related or not writing related?
No, I think it's really just the fact that I never went out and said, "Hey, I'm going to write a book one day." It really happened organically. It actually happened off of a Facebook thread. There was one of the groups that I follow, which is more of a romance group, and there was somebody commenting on a thread, and it went viral. And by the end of the evening, there were over like 600 comments
Oh my
on
goodness.
this thread. And somebody else that was another beta reader with me, who became my co-author, went out and wrote a one chapter short based off of this Facebook thread, and she shared it with some of us. And I, to be funny, said, "Oh, you know what? That's really cool. Let's all continue the story." And I run out and wrote a second chapter, thinking other people would pick it up. And Chloe looked at me and said, "This is great. We're writing this story." And that was how I wrote a book.
Well, there
Literally
you
with a co-writer, 3 months, start to finish, boom, we were done. And that started the journey. And since then, we've done a couple shorts. I've done the sci-fi. I've got at least 2 to 3 more coming up this year. So if you
Wow.
have the passion, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Not a bad way to be. Not a bad way to be at all. But then, I mean, I am a writer, so might be a little biased.
Right. So see, you know that the journey's there. There is no, people say, "Well, when is a good time to write a book?" It's like they say, you never plan to have children. If you really wait for the perfect day, it'll never happen. The day
Mm-hmm.
to write a book is now. If the
Mm-hmm.
story is perking your head, put the words down on the page.
Mm-hmm. That's always a good way to go. And then, of
Yep.
course, most people, at least around here, are at home. So, not
Right. So
bad.
it's a great
Right?
time to indulge your creativity and don't be afraid to go out there. You don't need software. There is
Mhm.
some great software out there, but you can use Google Docs, you can use Word. I know people who've written entire books on their iPhone using the Notes app. So if
That's
you,
impressive because the keyboard's just so small.
but they do it. They do it.
Wow. Good
And
for
I'm
them.
just saying, if the desire is there, there's no reason not to write it.
Yeah.
Go out and just try it. See what happens. That's the fun. That's the mystery.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It was great fun talking with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was really a lot of fun.